here are the odds. Michigan in the Big Ten, they are fourth. There's a big four, as you can see, a big gap after you get past Michigan, but you got Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Michigan up there. And again, as I was saying with the young quarterbacks, this is what you're seeing right here. Nobody knows what's going to go on with Ohio State. Nobody knows what's going to go on with Oregon or Michigan. So whichever one of these young quarterbacks, and let's say just one steps up and the other two, well, whoever that is, and it could be Michigan, I think that's going to be all the difference in the world right there. It's just an amazing number of big-time players that have left Ohio State and Oregon. And I know that in this day and age, it's transfers, you bring them back in, but it's difficult. And especially when you throw on top of that, you've got young, unproven quarterbacks. So I just don't really think it's going to be that easy for Ohio State and Oregon this year to just, oh yeah, we're great again, and yeah, we're going to blow out everybody. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm not saying they're not going to potentially be in the Big Ten championship game. All I'm saying is that I think it's going to be a little bit more wide open than people think.
I think so too. I mean, I think even outside that top three, from like 4 to 9 in this conference, I think you could see any number of teams rise up and be, the storyline this year is who's going to be this year's Indiana.
Yes.
It could still be Indiana. They brought a lot of guys back, and, their coach just wins. And if you don't believe me, he'll tell you several times. Yeah. So, I like the depth in this conference. Ohio State's interesting as the favorite because, like you said, they do lose so much from last year, but it's also not outside the realm of possibility that, they're going to get Texas in week 1. And then I think in week 4, they head out to Washington, to a team that I think is going to be much improved.
I agree.
And I think Big Ten teams traveling multiple time zones last year, I could have this stat wrong, but I think they were 6-22 or something like that.
Wow.
So that's not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination. No. So I think ultimately, I picked Penn State to win the Big Ten we did a football preview magazine, as we do every year.
Yeah. I do too.
I think that, with all the roster changes, it's so frenetic now year to year and what these teams and rosters look like. I do think there's still something to be said for experience, continuity, and having a group that's been through some stuff together.
Yes.
Ohio State last year had obviously, they'd have a group that had been through 4 straight losses to Michigan, and they lost a tough game at Oregon. And, they were able to rally from that and win the national title. That Michigan team, and again, I know people aren't going to play the world's smallest violin for the Michigan Wolverines. I get that, but that was a team that went through a lot during that 2023 season that had nothing to do with the guys on the field. And there were the playoff heartbreaks the years before that, against Georgia, the letdown against TCU. I place in order to reach the mountaintop, I do feel like you kind of have to go through some stuff. And as we saw last year's college football playoff Final Four was made up of guys in James Franklin and Marcus Freeman, Steve Sarkisian, Ryan Day, who at one point, a lot of people had either written off, called fraudulent, what have you. So I think this 12-team playoff sets up for redemption for a lot of these types of guys because, you have a little bit more margin for error. And I just feel like Penn State, I don't know if they're going to win the national title, but the Big Ten, I just think their roster is just a little bit better at everyone else's.
Yeah, they don't because they didn't lose all those guys that Ohio State and Oregon did, and they were pretty neck and neck with those teams last year. And I think of course they lost Carter, but everybody's got to lose.
Of course, a lot of people would also say counterpoint James Franklin.
I was going to get to that. Yeah, and I must say, and look, I know that a lot of Penn State fans who already wouldn't mind seeing a change, but in my opinion, if this team looks every bit as good as we think they should look, and they get to the playoffs and can't at least get to the championship game, I mean, what are we doing here? The team is set up right now to win a national championship. And if you can at least get there, and look, I get it. Maybe you lose a semifinal game in overtime and things happen, but I agree. Matter of fact, I think if they had a coach that maybe had a little bit more, playoff production, maybe already won a national championship, I think Penn State would probably be the overwhelming choice to win the national championship. But you just can't. You don't know. He's never won it before, and I don't know. I don't want to hear he won some playoff games last year because come on, who did they beat?
Yeah, I think now more than ever, like you want to have the known commodity, you want to have the bird in hand. But I think if I'm a fan of a team, I want as many swings at the piñata as possible. And if it means that I go to the playoff 4 years in a row and I lose 4 years in a row, but I'm still in the playoff next year, I'm always going to take the shots on goal, so to speak, because you got to break through eventually, right? But there is that aspect of if not now, when for them, because I think if they don't do it this year, things could change quite a bit.
And Michigan's sitting there at 25-1 to win the national championship, which is pretty respectful. Again, especially comparing to what happened last year. So it is what it is. Again, I think that I don't know if you made. I know you talked about a prediction. Have you made a prediction yet on Michigan?
Yeah, I think I'm a little more on the. This might not be a surprise to anyone who's listened to us the last hour or so, but I'm pretty bullish on them this year. I think the defense, even if, and we didn't really talk about this, but if there is some sort of Sharon Moore suspension early in the year, I think that defense is going to travel, and I think that that's going to give them more than a puncher's chance to win every game that they play. And it's all about how this offense comes along. And those road trips early in the year are tough. You're going to Oklahoma, you go to Nebraska, you go to USC, all within the first 6 weeks of the year. It's not crazy that they might go 4-2 in that stretch, or a 3-3 is even in the range of outcomes there. But the back half of their schedule, I think, is super friendly. You got a tough game, what I think will be a tough game against Washington, but from there you're going to play Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, wherever you think those 4 teams might finish. They are 4 of the bottom half of the teams in the league.
Yes.
So even if they start 4-2, or God forbid 3-3, I think the fan base would probably start freaking out if that happened. There's going to be that ramp to really take that step forward and position yourself for that Ohio State game, which means everything. I picked them to go 10-2 this year. I think they will beat Ohio State again. I just like what Michigan has. It comes down to the trenches. I like what they have up front on both sides of the ball over what Ohio State has. Ohio State has what might be the 2 best players in college football, but I think Michigan's has retained the ingredients that have sort of, been a nightmare for the Buckeyes these last few years, especially with, I think, 2 running backs that I think very highly of. And who knows, like by that time in the season, I think the Bryce Underwood that we see is going to look very different than the Bryce Underwood that likely starts week 2 at Oklahoma. So I have them going 10-2, losing to Oklahoma, losing at USC. But the way that shook out, and this even surprised me, because when I do the prediction in the magazine, I pick all the games. I'm not just throwing a number out there. I pick every game in the Big Ten, and it's all tied in, and I double and triple and quadruple check.
Okay.
The season that I picked Michigan to have would put them in the Big Ten championship game against Penn State, where I think Penn State would win, because I just think they're more experienced, have a little more talent in some key areas. But that might be a rosier picture for them, but I don't know if the floor is that much lower. I mean, the floor, obviously, it could be much lower than that if you have a freshman quarterback that isn't ready to play, and maybe you're sitting at 7-5 again. But I just feel like there's the boxes that they've needed to check this offseason. I think they've done a pretty good job of that. And I think that defense is going to be one of the best defenses in the country, and that's going to carry them.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's my championship Big Ten pick, Penn State over Michigan. And but again, that the thing about this season at Big Ten, as we've talked about plenty of times, these young quarterbacks, we really don't know what to expect. But I think we're pretty confident that if we have to gamble on it and make our best guess, we kind of know what Underwood is, or, just from where he's been. And if he just keeps growing into that quarterback that he can be talent wise, he is more talented than these other kids. He just is. And so if he just stays ahead of them like he is now, then I agree. I think he's that difference maker with that defense that gives him something that they haven't had even in the last couple of years. So I'm with you. I think, but it's relying on all these young quarterbacks. Anything can happen, and that's what the fun of it is. For the most part, or even just who's going to be like the top guys in next year's class, I don't hear Drew's name a whole lot. I hear it a little bit, but not as much as I think his name should be heard after what happened last year. Now, I don't know whether or not if I didn't watch Penn State football all year like I did because of doing the post game, that I would maybe I'd share their opinion. But since I watched a lot more of Drew than the normal person outside of Penn State who's not a fan, I really got to see a heck of a talent and somebody that I could just tell is headed in the right direction. There's so many things to like about him. We talked about he's that type of player where when he makes the bad play, like the worst play of the game for him, he comes right back on the next series and marches right down the field and probably puts his best series behind him, which is very rare to do for a young kid who's really, even though it's his second year, it was his breakout year, but still talked about the mobility difference, unbelievable, night and day from year one to year two. So you just think that's going to get better. If he had, and who knows, now that he's got better receiver, I know Warren, but now that you've got three quality wideouts that he did not have last year, and maybe one of, if not the best offensive line in college football, I can see him actually having the same type of bounce that he had last year. And if he does, he'll be consensus number one pick.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any player in college football who has more to gain this year than Drew Aller, if you're talking solely from the NFL. Because like you said, if he comes out and puts together the type of season he's capable of, he could easily lock down 1-1 next April, right? So, yeah, I'm with you because you mentioned how people don't follow Penn State closely. And it's true because unfortunately, what were his two worst games last year? Ohio State and Notre Dame over their two biggest games. Ohio State and Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinal.
You're right. Yeah.
Even against Boise, if you just box scored that game, I mean, there were 4 or 5 just incredible throws he made that were dropped by the receivers. So I think, you mentioned the receivers, and yes, Tyler Warren's gone, and he did so much for this team. But I do think the fact that last year, everybody knew you had to focus on Tyler Warren. Everybody put their entire effort on Tyler Warren, and the receivers still couldn't make plays. That was just so detrimental. So this year, now that you have receivers, you expect to make plays. You're not going to have one guy replace Tyler Warren, but you can have a group of guys replace him. You mentioned that offensive line. I'd argue they've got the best running back room in the country as well, at least the best top with Singleton and Allen. I think there's a big jump there to be made. And again, this team can win in a lot of different ways. But they're going to go as far as Drew's going to take them. Because last year against Notre Dame, when Drew had his worst game of the season, they came up 3 points short of playing for a national championship. It's going to be the same way this year. You get into the quarterfinals, the semifinals, you're playing at Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, whoever it may be. Drew's going to have to play well for them to win that game. Even if it's like Notre Dame, because look at Notre Dame. Nicholas Singleton had the game of his life. And everyone forgets about it because of how that game ended. But Nick Singleton was on another level in that game against Notre Dame last year. But in the end, it didn't matter because when they needed the passing offense to come through, it didn't come through. And that's what cost him. That's everybody remembers. So I think there's more there for him. I also think being in year 2 in Andy Kotelnicki's offense is very important, right? His first 2 years as a starter, you had 2 different offensive schemes.
Good point.
So, now to be year 2 with Andy Kotelnicki, I think that's very important because it's like any offense or any defense. Year 2, there's always more you can unlock because the players are more familiar and whatnot, right? So I think that's going to be vital for them as well this year with Drew. And they're going to go as far as he takes them, but I think there's reason to believe that he can put it together. And, you mentioned his ability to bounce back because last year, you and I came on and talked about all the time. USC, he looked lost in the first half, and in the second half single-handedly takes over that game, brings them back to win. The Minnesota game, right before halftime, they're down. It looks like, man, they're going to get upset here. And he marches them down the field right before the half to score. And even though Minnesota still led at halftime, that drive right before the half gave them the momentum going into the half. Penn State took over in the second half, coming back and wins. He was so good at that last year, even against Oregon. Early on was struggling through that pick six where Oregon went up 28-10, and then the rest of the game until the last drive when he got intercepted. But that wasn't even, I don't even put that on him. He was just trying to force the play because there was 2 minutes left. They needed to make a play. He was tearing that defense apart. So he is very good at that. And why I'm mentioning that again after you said it is, I think not just losing in the semifinal, but the way they lost by 3 points, field goal on the last play, the interception he threw that set that up when they were in a position to at worst go to overtime. Yeah. I think that's going to fuel him. I'm sure it has all offseason. It's going to into the season to just bounce back, turn it around, prove people wrong. And the thing is with Drew, look at this quarterback class last year in the NFL draft. You mean tell me if Drew didn't declare he wouldn't have been, if not a second round pick. He left life-changing money on the table to come back to Penn State and make one. Obviously he's getting paid handsomely to come back, but he left generational money on the table to come back and make one last run at this. A lot of these guys did. And, I know this is a comparison a lot of people have made, but look, 2 years ago, it was Michigan who everybody came back to make one more run at it. Look what happened. Last year, Ohio State, everybody comes back to make one more run at it. Look what happened. And now this year, that team's Penn State. So that's not to say they're going to win the national championship. I think they're very capable of it. I think this is the best team they've had since 1999, the last time they were preseason number one. But I think that has a lot of these guys, Drew leading the charge, just driven. If they weren't hell-bent on winning a national championship at Penn State, there are a lot of guys, him at the front and center of it, who left a lot of money on the table to come back for one more year of college.
And the key is going to be whether he can and will take that jump that should be there, because there is more to him. There's no doubt there's more to his game that needs to be refined if he's going to be that superstar quarterback at the next level and that surefire number one overall pick of the draft. Now it's up to him to go out there and get it done, because if he doesn't, if he needs more pro coaching, it ain't going to happen. They're not going to win a national championship this year unless he can take another level to this team, because there are going to be other good teams that they're going to have to compete with, other very well coached teams, other very well talented teams. So, I feel that he can do it. And they're 7-1 right now to win the national championship. I believe that is the fourth choice overall behind Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia. We'll get into. Oh, and by the way, they are 260 on the Big Ten, just behind Ohio State at 2-1. So they're the second choice in the Big Ten, and the win total is 10.5, 125 plus, which is actually pretty good. Minus 150 under, which means it's actually slanting more towards 9.5, which I'm kind of surprised about, because I looked at the schedule, and to me, I do think this is a team that should be able to do what they did last year and go at least 11-1, and then run the table if they're going to win a national championship. I don't see them. I just don't see this team, especially the schedule. I think the schedule is a good enough schedule for them. No Michigan again. There are some weak points to the schedule. Throw in the fact that yes, they do have to go out Ohio State and Iowa. They did not have to play Iowa last year, but in general, get Oregon at home, which is important. And they really only have two tough road games, Iowa and Ohio State, and then throw in the home game against Oregon. So those are just three games really on their schedule, where if they lose any game other than those three, it's going to be a big surprise. So therefore, what the line Vegas is saying is that they think that, yeah, it might be tricky for them to go 2-1 in those games. And I'm like, no, I mean, they should go 2-1 in those games. So that's why I think they're a pretty good over bet at again, I think it's plus 120 over 10.5.
Yeah. And two other schedule caveats I want to point out. One, you play Iowa and Ohio State back to back. However, you have a bye week in between there, which I think is very important.
Okay.
And Iowa, if nothing else, they're physically going to beat you up. Even if you win the game, you're going to limp out of it a little bit. So you have a week off to recover from Iowa and the extra week to prep for Ohio State, which I think can be as important as anything. Also, because we saw last year one of the Big Ten expanded this way, how much teams kind of struggled going East Coast to West Coast and back. You got to go to UCLA. But, I mean, UCLA I think will be better this year, but you're not that's a game you're going to win easily.
But should win, yes.
What's nice there is you come back home and have Northwestern, which is not a knock on Northwestern, but if you have a game where you're not going to get home to Christ knows what time Sunday morning, so Sunday's probably out the window, and then you're dealing with jet lag on Monday, like Northwestern's a team you want to be preparing for when you've got the week of jet lag and all that going on. So those are two other things with the schedule I think that set up really well for them, because I'm with you. Outside of Iowa, Ohio State, and Oregon, there's no game on this schedule that should be considered an acceptable loss. And I'm not even sure I would. It's tough to say because Oregon is so talented, but that team lost so much.
Yeah.
It's going to be the first road start for Dante Moore.
Yep.
It's going to be a primetime whiteout. I just have a hard time justifying them losing that game. And again, that's not knocking Oregon. I think Oregon is very good, but if you're as good as Penn State says they are this year, when you get a team early in the season at home in probably the most volatile environment in college football with a quarterback making his first career road start, that's a game you got to win. You got to win. And I think the important thing for them is, like you said, if they're going to go, they'll probably go 11-1 in the regular season because it's really hard to 12-0, especially playing in the Big Ten and the SEC. It's really hard to do that. I just think between Oregon and Ohio State, the big thing is you got to win at least one of those two.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Then it puts you in the position too, where if you win one of those two and then still only go 10-2, you're going to feel disappointed. So,
and there'll still be a playoff team.
Yes.
But yes, that
road becomes a lot tougher especially this year doing the straight seeding, because let's say it would have been like last year where you're 11-1, get to the Big Ten title game and get tripped up. If that happens again this year, you're probably still a top 4 seed like you should have been last year. So you probably still get that first round bye as long as you at least get to Indy. Because odds are you're playing either Ohio State or Oregon, who's also coming in, 10, 11, 12 wins. So you probably both feel comfortable saying you're in the top 4, regardless of outcome there. So I think that, in the regular season, if they don't go at least 11-1, it's going to feel disappointing. But like you said, 10 wins will get you into the playoff. And I can guarantee you, last year at the end of the regular season, there wasn't an Ohio State fan in the world who felt good about their team or didn't want Ryan Day going off a bridge somewhere or something. And look how things turned out for them.
Yeah, it's a new age.
You got to get in. You got to get in, especially when you're this talented. But I will say, I think if they don't go at least 11-1, people are going to feel uneasy and feel disappointed going into the playoff. And that'll probably just put even more pressure. I think there already is a lot of pressure in James Franklin, right or wrong, for this season. I don't think any team ever should view a season as national championship or bust. Ohio State last year is probably the closest the team's ever been to saying they should view it that way. And so I'm not saying Penn State should view this as national championship or bust, but you definitely feel, hey, if not now, when? We don't play Michigan. Yeah. Ohio State's replacing a lot. Oregon replaces a lot when we get them early in the year at home. You look at the SEC. Yeah, Georgia's going to be good. Bama's going to be good, but you don't view either of them as like, the Death Star.
We're not worried about the SEC anymore.
The Death Star.
Like we used to be, the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're not the Death Star teams that they were 5-6 years ago, right? No. At least not this year. Like you go into the season where it's like, hey, most everybody will tell you Penn State, Texas might be the 2 deepest, most talented rosters. So again, if not now, when? You've got an experienced quarterback, you have maybe the best offensive line in the country, your running back room is as good as any in the country. You have probably the best coordinator duo in the country. Right. I don't think there's any team with a better duo than Kotelnicki and Knowles. I really don't. Like the stars have completely aligned for you this year. So again, I'm not saying they have to win it, but if it just feels like if you don't do it now, when will it ever happen?
Yeah, it just seems that again, if the team gets lucky this year with the injuries and it doesn't deplete them from some really key guys, and they get a little bit better quarterback play, he's going to be there the whole year. And they're just overall more talented for another season under the system. It could then be that 8 to, I don't want to go to 10 myself because it's so tough in the Big Ten and that schedule is really tough. And I don't know if they can get to that point because you mentioned it too, the road. I don't remember what it was. There was a trend that I can't remember, but I know it had to do with USC on the road under Lincoln Riley too. It's like, they're just not you don't want to be taking USC on the road. I think as a favorite. I think that's what it is. I think road favorite Lincoln Riley USC is not very good.
I can't speak to that, but I that sounds right. They were just
Something like that,
awful.
yeah.
I mean, they lost to Minnesota last year at the end of the game. They lost to Maryland. Maryland had one Big Ten win last year. It was USC. So they were not good enough on the road last year.
No, just as I breeze through here, just for the road games. And of course, they were a dog in the LSU game, which they actually won, of course. But dog is completely different for USC because they even covered the Michigan game on the road as a dog. But yeah, that's pretty much when they've had their most trouble is being a road favorite. But the other thing too is win some of those close games that they weren't able to win, including the Penn State game. You mentioned the Notre Dame game. And those are two of the best teams in the country, as it turned out. And those games really went down to the wire. And that's why I think that there should be hope for USC, because it wasn't like they lost so many players, so many key guys that they couldn't replace coming into this season. So, yeah, I mean, and that's the general attitude you're getting, Connor, as far as the fan base?
Yeah, I think the fan base is high on USC, and nationally, I don't think people are as high as the fan base, which happens every year. But like, there's a disconnect there because of how bad USC's done the last couple of years. But like, I also think everyone who they lost in the portal was overblown. Like, they lost Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson, and USC was just getting hammered for their transfer portal losses. But like, they retained the most important guys who they needed to retain. So I think that went under the radar, and I think they're better than that 7.5 number myself.
Yeah, and then of course you lose your starting running back, 1,000-yard runner, and they're not really. Oh, they got a running back from New Mexico. They're not going to give that much credence. So, look, that's what we like to see, though. We're always trying to find teams, good bargains, teams that are sleepers, and it's hard to believe that USC would be considered a sleeper, but they are. This is life in the Big Ten. And by the way, they're 100-1 to win the national championship. Again, that's a completely different discussion, but it's still 100-1. They're the co-fifth choice in the Big Ten at 30-1, behind Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon. Not a surprise. Tied with Illinois, and that, of course, will be a big game. I believe that's game number 5, and that might even be one of the big games of the season, because starting 4-0, now here's a team that's right in your wheelhouse as far as standings are concerned. And if you can beat that team, and I believe it's a road game, you win that game, then that could really be the type of game that gets you going the rest of the season, or vice versa. So
yeah, absolutely. Illinois is the team that returns a bunch of their guys. They're getting some college football playoff buzz. If USC's undefeated, beats them, stays undefeated, big time road win, then that would create some college football buzz for them, which happened a little bit after the LSU game last season, but then quickly went away.
Yeah.
That would be more valuable than what it was from a year ago, for sure.